First Circuit Court is back in session.
Too much responsibility to say.
Good afternoon, Mr. Clerk.
Good afternoon.
Just a few questions for you. I just want to make sure that everybody's really clear.
Could you speak up a little louder?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure that everyone is really clear that the room that Mr. Barrett did go into was 1049, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The records show Mr. Barrett went into the room right next to Erin Andrews, correct?
Yes.
The record shows that he went into a room that was in an alcove off of the hall, correct?
Correct.
The records also show that 2 days earlier, on September 2, he made a call to the hotel that got moved over to the call center, and he requested a room next to Erin Andrews, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so when we look at documents, we see that on September 2, he asked for a room next to Erin Andrews to Takima Baker, right?
I believe so, yes. She was at the reservation center, I believe.
The very first piece of evidence the ladies and gentlemen of the jury heard in this case was the videotaped deposition of Takima Baker, who said she took down that information, typed it, and sent it to the Nashville Marriott. Did you know that?
I understand that that's what she said. I also understand that the information never made it to the Nashville Marriott.
Well, it made it to Marcia, didn't it?
I'm only aware that it made it into Pure.
You didn't know that it made it to Marcia?
I know that the A1 code obviously showed up, an adjoining room.
You know that the ladies and gentlemen have seen the printout of the Oscar document at the Nashville Marriott that shows that request typed out. Did you know that?
No, sir.
Okay. The Oscar history that bears a West End Windsor bait stamp, because it was produced by them in this case. It was produced by the Nashville Marriott in this case, shows that he had made that request for the room next to Erin Andrews on September 2. You didn't know that?
I was aware that he had, in making the reservation, he had requested an adjoining room. I was of the impression that it had not made its information, had not made its way to the hotel itself.
But if it's in the Oscar produced by Windsor West End in this case, it made it to the hotel, didn't it?
If it was in Oscar, it was part of the guest history of that reservation from inception until that person left the hotel. Whether that the fact that that request was put on an information line seems to create the fact that it didn't make its way to the hotel.
You read Rivera Keene's deposition, didn't you? Nina Rivera Keene, right?
Yes, I did.
And she told us in her deposition that she...
Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Rivera Keene's testified here. There's no... He's impeaching this witness with the deposition testimony of another witness, and he hadn't even established that impeachment is necessary.
I'll rephrase. You know that Rivera Keene knew how to access Marcia, right?
No, I was not aware of that, no.
You didn't see that in her deposition?
I don't recall reading that, no.
So, but you did read her deposition, correct?
I do
Your Honor,
recall.
That's already in evidence. Ms. Rivera-Keene's testified here, and he keeps referring to deposition testimony of someone else. This is not Mr. Turk's deposition. He's impeaching.
I think that he answered the question. So here's my next question. When the A1C1, when Takima Baker hit the button to send this information to the Nashville Marriott, with that information went the code A1C1, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And that's, again, in the documents, in the records, that he wanted an adjoining or connecting room, correct?
He had requested an adjoining or connecting room, but the property, to my understanding, was not aware of connecting to whom.
And so, who did the property adjoin his room to?
I don't think they adjoined his room to anybody because they didn't know who he had requested to adjoin to.
Whose room was adjoining his?
Are you referring to the room he ended up staying in?
He was in 1049, right?
Yes, sir.
Whose room adjoined his?
Erin Andrews.
There was only one room that adjoined 1049, and it was Erin Andrews, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you talked about this issue of security, and that you got a good grade on security from the review by Marriott International when it came in.
They actually contract for a QA inspection service. It's not actually a Marriott International employee. It's a third-party company that they hire to do their QA inspections.
When Mr. Strachan was here, he testified that the only incident that they had was some bank robber who ran through the hotel and flushed money down the toilet. Were you aware of that incident?
Yes, I was.
Were you aware of the incidents of domestic abuse going on at the Nashville Marriott?
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Well, who knows?
No, the only other incident that I'm aware of as documented by Cumberland was an incident involving a homeless person that had come into the hotel.
Now, Ms. Nina Rivera-Keene, when she was here, she was a front desk supervisor. She testified that there had been incidents of domestic abuse at the hotel. That information never got back to you?
No.
So did that information get to the people that were doing that review on behalf of Marriott International of your security?
I don't know.
Did it ever get back to you that Cumberland, the security company, had recommended that there be security 24/7 and not just overnight provided by Cumberland? Did that ever get back to you?
I heard that that was a suggestion of theirs, yes.
Back then?
Back when we were managing the hotel, yes.
By the way, did you also receive information that Cumberland had recommended more security cameras?
I was aware that was their recommendation, yes.
So when you say back when you were managing the hotel, when did Windsor start managing the Nashville Marriott?
September of 2006.
And when was Windsor replaced?
October 31st of 2008.
Telephones. There were only 3 phones that you could recall at your deposition that had LCD screens on them in the hotel when you managed it, right?
At the time I was being deposed, I recalled 3 because I had personally seen them during my visits to the hotel, and that's why I said I knew of those 3.
The only 3 phones that you had personally seen that had LCD screens on them were in the general manager's office, the controller's office, and the director of sales office, correct?
That's because I'd been into those offices, yes, during my visits.
And you recognize that wherever there were LCD screens, that customers, guests, visitors were not supposed to be given access to them, correct?
They were generally located in areas for hotel employee use, not guest use.
Am I correct?
I'm sorry, re-ask your question.
The phones that had LCD displays were not to be permitted to be used by hotel guests, visitors, or customers, right?
That's correct. They were there for hotel employee use.
And that was for security purposes, right?
Generally speaking, yes. But in the case of the hostess stands in the hotel, in the restaurant, they were used, as I stated earlier, to be able to identify a call coming to the hotel, to the hostess stand, so they could greet the guest by using their name.
When a call would come down from the guest, it would light up and say who the guest was that was calling and what their room number was, right?
Yes, it did.
Now, did you ever see one of those phones at the place in the restaurant that you're talking about?
I don't recall specifically seeing one now.
Counsel talked about the foreseeability of somebody removing a peephole. Isn't it true that there was a checklist for preventive maintenance, not housekeeping, but preventive maintenance, to make sure that the peepholes were secure, right?
The peephole, the door viewer, was one of probably 100 items on a guest room preventative maintenance inspection form.
Can you put up Exhibit 15, please? By the way, you're not telling the jury that it was less important to make sure the peephole was secure because it was one of 100 things on a checklist, are you?
I'm merely saying it was one of a large number of items on a checklist, as you can see by looking at the list.
Are you telling them it was less important?
No.
In fact, it's one of the things on the checklist that is a safety device, right?
It's a safety feature, yes, sir.
It is very important that it is tight, correct?
It's important for everything in the room to be functioning properly.
It is very important for the peephole, that safety device, to be tight, correct?
Yes.
Because if it's not tight, someone can unscrew it by hand, right?
It fits very tight against the door. I think it would be hard to unscrew by hand.
If it's not tight, it can be unscrewed by hand. Right?
If it was loose on the door, then perhaps it could be, yes.
And one reason that going back to at least 2005, the checklist required that the preventive maintenance make sure that it was secure was to make sure that it was tight, right?
Tight and functional, both, yes.
And it wasn't just a checklist. We have it up here. You've seen this before, haven't you?
I've seen blank lists like this one, yes.
By the way, the only ones you've seen in this case, are blank, right?
Yes, this is just a sample form.
You've never seen one that was actually filled out with regard to Erin Andrews' room 1051, right?
That's true.
And if we look at this, we go up to the top and enlarge it up at the top. This is so precise that it would tell you the date, the time spent doing it, the room number, and who did it, right?
That's correct.
There was supposed to be a form like this, fully filled out, for every room in the hotel every 3 to 4 months, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you haven't found one for this room, have you?
No, nor did I look for one for that room or any other room in the hotel for that matter.
So, if we can go down to, well, let's say up here for a second. See where it says closet in the middle top row?
Yes, sir.
And you see it says hangers in place?
Yes, sir.
There are many things on this form that are not safety issues, like hangers being in place, correct?
Yes, sir.
But when it comes to secure peephole, that's a very important safety issue, right?
It's one of many issues on the form, and yes, it's an important safety issue like the door latch and the deadbolt.
Because going all the way back to 2005 and before, you could predict that if that peephole was not tight, that somebody could unscrew it and look inside, right?
Peepholes were installed as a device to be able to look out of the guest room and into a corridor to see who was knocking on your door before you open the door. That was the purpose that peepholes were added as a safety feature.
Let me try my question again.
Okay?
One reason that going back to 2005, that it was required that that peephole be tight is so that people didn't unscrew it from the outside, right?
Correct.
If it was loose, it would still function as a peephole, letting somebody inside look through it to see who's on the outside, right?
That's right.
But the problem with being loose was not whether it functioned as a peephole, but whether it made it easy for someone to unscrew it, right?
If it was loose, it would be easier to unscrew. Yes, sir.
And the way those things get tightened up is from the inside. That's where the screwdriver tightens up, because the outside is a smooth bevel around the lens, right?
It is tightened from the inside, but there is
Am I right?
I'm sorry, ask your question
He
again.
just answered his question, Your Honor. I mean, he's got to let him talk.
sorry.
Would you ask the question again?
Sure. The outside is a smooth bevel around the lens, right?
Yes, but there is a bit of the frame of the unit that you can get your fingers on. It's not totally smooth right against the door.
And so therefore, since there's a way to get your fingers on it, it's got to be tight so that you can't unscrew it from the outside, right?
Yes.
And that's because it was foreseeable that people sometimes try to unscrew it from the outside, right?
No, I think it was designed to be tightened up so that it would stay in place. No different than tightening a screw or a bolt on any other thing in the room.
You read Mr. Barrett's deposition, correct?
Yes, it did.
You only read one volume of it, correct?
I read the version of it that I was given. I wasn't aware that there was any but one.
He was never given a temporary access to the concierge level while he waited for his room to be prepared? Was he?
Objection, lack of foundation. He's just indicated he hadn't read the whole thing.
Was he?
I'm sorry, ask your question again.
He was never given temporary access to the concierge room lounge the morning of September 4th while he waited for his room to be prepared. Was he?
I'm not sure, no.
He never said he was he?
Okay,
Well, you read it, didn't you?
I did.
Nothing further.
The Oscar document that was questioned by Mr. Borlett, that document was produced by West End because it was provided to the FBI by West End per their request, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So it was during West End's cooperation with the FBI in trying to track down Mr. Barrett that this document was found and produced, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Now, an Oscar document, that's a history document, right?
That's correct.
It's generated after the guest is checked out, everything's solid, everything's written in stone.
Yes, it's a historical reflection of that guest visit from start to finish.
And so it pulls information not from just what's at the PMS system there locally here in Nashville, but it pulls information also from Marriott International systems, right?
Yes, it does.
And it puts it in one document after the fact in case you need to access that for any charge discrepancies or anything like that.
That's correct.
And so the fact that that comment shows up on an Oscar document created after Mr. Barrett checks out in no way indicates that it ever got to the hotel, correct?
Objection, meeting argument.
If you're referring to the...
Don't testify. Ask the question.
You ever heard of Tim Easley?
Yes,
Does he go by the name of Big Tim?
that's my understanding, yes, it's a nickname.
And does Big Tim work daytime security back in September of 2008?
Yes, he did.
Now, you were asked a question about the replacement of Windsor. Windsor was replaced as a property management company in October of 2008.
That's correct.
So let me make sure I've got this timeline correct. The events of Mr. Barrett's criminal acts occurred in July of 2008.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
September of 2008, sorry. Too many, getting ahead of myself. Yeah. Got to get my football season right. So let's start over again.
Thank you.
It's been a long day. Mr. Barrett did his criminal acts in September of 2008, correct?
September 4th to be exact.
Okay. And then Windsor was replaced a month later in October of 2008.
That's correct.
Now, in October of 2008, did anybody outside of Mr. Barrett know what he had done?
Not to my knowledge, and none of us with Windsor Capital.
And in fact, no one knew what Mr. Barrett had done other than Mr. Barrett and TMZ until July of 2009, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So the fact that Windsor was replaced in October of 2008 had absolutely nothing to do with the events in this case, correct?
No, we would have been given notice before that event ever even happened.
Now, you were asked a lot of questions about those PM sheets. When Windsor was replaced in October of 2008, did it gather up all of the documents, all the housekeeping records, all the maintenance records, and take them with them?
No, not at all.
Were those left at the hotel?
Best of my knowledge, yes. We didn't take them.
So when Miss Andrew filed her lawsuit in 2011, over a year after Windsor had left the property, would Windsor have had those documents?
No. The only documents we would have kept would have been human resources files, accounting information, and sales information, which was all proprietary to Windsor Capital.
Does the fact that Windsor Capital not have a document that puts a specific date of the last time that Miss Andrews' room was checked, in your opinion, mean that no preventative maintenance was ever done at the property?
No, absolutely not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
So, are you saying that West End had already indicated that they were going to terminate your services before September 4, 2008?
Well, very likely they would have given us a 60 days notice.
So probably they had given you notice of termination of Windsor August?
I don't know the exact date, but I'm sure it would have been more than 30 days in advance. I mean, that's just, would have been required by the contract.
Thank you. I concur.
Just to make sure I'm clear, did everyone that was employed by Windsor in September of 2008 leave in October when Windsor left?
No, I believe Lighthouse Lodging retained most, if not all of them.
Nothing further.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
All right.
Can you give us some idea about the schedule tomorrow and Thursday?
Yes, Your Honor. Right now we have possibly two live witnesses, Dr. Rappaport and Jacqueline Dement. We also have Jesse Palmer's audio-visual deposition. And then we've got Hudak, I'm sorry, I forgot about Richard Hudak. And then we've got to make, between the parties, what we're going to do with Barrett.
Okay, with Barrett deposition, both of you have to agree to open it up. Understand that?
Understood, Your Honor.
Okay.
I got it. So just to make sure, because they're looking and asking each other, so while we're here, we might as well figure this out. So when you say we both have to open up, if both sides agree that there's portions they want to read that were not in the deposition or that, then we're good. We can each put in what we want. But if only one side says they want to do it, then it's status quo.
That is good.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.